This happened in November of 2024 during a hunting trip I took with my uncle Darren near a remote patch of timberland outside of Jasper, Arkansas. I wasn't much of a hunter. Honestly, I only agreed to go because I hadn't spent much time with my uncle in years, and he kept insisting this would be a good weekend to reconnect. He'd been hunting those woods for decades and talked about the property like it was his second home. The land sat several miles off the highway behind a locked gate and a winding dirt road. There was an old cabin there, built sometime in the 1960s according to my uncle. It wasn't much to look at anymore. The paint had long since faded, the porch sagged slightly, and most of the furniture looked older than I was. Still, it had electricity from a generator, running water from a well, and enough comfort for a weekend in the woods. We arrived late Friday afternoon and spent the evening unloading gear and preparing for the next morning's hunt. Everything felt peaceful. The forest stretched for miles in every direction, and aside from distant bird calls, it was completely silent. That night, while lying in bed, I heard something scrape against the side of the cabin. At first, I thought it was just a branch moving in the wind. Then it happened again, a long dragging sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I sat up and listened. The noise stopped. After a few minutes, I convinced myself it was nothing and eventually fell asleep. Before sunrise, Darren woke me up and we headed out toward a large elevated blind overlooking a clearing. The morning was cold and foggy. Visibility wasn't great, but we settled in and waited. For the first couple hours, nothing happened. Around mid-morning, I picked up my binoculars and scanned the tree line. That's when I noticed someone standing there. At least I thought it was someone. The figure was partially hidden behind a large oak tree nearly a mile away. I could only see a shoulder, part of a head, and what looked like an arm. But it was enough. Someone was watching us. I lowered the binoculars and looked again with my naked eye. Nothing. I raised them once more. The figure was back, still standing there, still watching. I immediately nudged Darren and handed him the binoculars. He looked for a few moments before chuckling. "Probably a tree stump," he said. I told him it wasn't. He shrugged and handed the binoculars back. By the time I looked again, the figure was gone. The rest of the hunt passed uneventfully. Later that afternoon, Darren managed to harvest a deer near a creek bed about half a mile from the cabin. We spent the next couple hours dressing it and hanging it from a metal game pole behind the cabin. As evening approached, we drove into town for supplies. We were gone maybe 40 minutes. When we returned, the deer was ruined. Large sections of meat had been torn away. The hide was shredded. Deep claw marks covered the carcass. At first, Darren blamed coyotes. But something about the damage didn't look right. The cuts seemed too deliberate, too focused, almost like someone had used a knife in some places. The sight left both of us uneasy. After dinner, Darren decided we should investigate. We grabbed flashlights and rifles and started walking the perimeter of the property. For nearly an hour, we found nothing. Then I saw it again, the same figure, standing between two trees, watching us. This time it was much closer, maybe 80 yards away. I immediately pointed it out. The second my flashlight moved toward it, the figure slipped behind the trees and vanished. Darren finally took me seriously. He whispered for me to stay where I was while he checked it out. I hated the idea, but before I could argue, he disappeared into the darkness. The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity. I stood there alone, listening to every sound around me. Every crack, every rustle, every movement. Then a gunshot shattered the silence. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Uncle Darren!" I yelled. No response. I ran toward the sound. When I found him, he was standing over a large feral dog. The animal had apparently charged him after he approached a patch of brush. I felt relieved seeing he was okay, but that relief didn't last, because moments later we both heard something deeper in the woods. A scream. Not human. Not any animal either of us recognized. It echoed through the trees and seemed to come from every direction at once. The sound froze us in place. Then came another. Closer. Much closer. The second scream was followed by heavy movement crashing through the underbrush. Something big was moving toward us. Fast. Darren didn't hesitate. Run. We sprinted. Branches whipped against our faces as we raced back toward the cabin. Behind us came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy. Powerful. keeping pace with us. Whatever it was remained hidden in the darkness, but it was there. I could hear its breathing, deep and raspy, close enough that I didn't dare look back. We burst through the cabin door and slammed it shut. Darren locked every lock while I shoved a table against the entrance. For several seconds there was silence. Then something hit the front wall. Hard. The entire cabin shook. Another impact followed, then another. A loud screech erupted outside. The same horrible sound we'd heard in the woods. I remember gripping my rifle so tightly my hands hurt. The noises continued for nearly a minute. Then everything stopped. The silence that followed somehow felt worse. We sat there listening, waiting. Neither of us moved. Finally, after several minutes, Darren stepped toward the window and carefully pulled back the curtain. Nothing. Whatever had been outside was gone. We stayed awake the entire night. The next morning, we found deep tracks circling the cabin, but none of them were clear enough to identify. The local sheriff came out later that day after we reported what happened. He examined the property and took photographs, but he couldn't offer any explanation. He suggested it was probably wildlife. Maybe a bear, maybe a mountain lion, maybe something else. Neither Darren nor I believe that. I've spent years trying to come up with a logical explanation for what happened that weekend. Maybe there is one. Maybe there isn't. What I do know is this. Something watched us from those woods. Something followed us back to the cabin. And whatever made that scream is something I never want to hear again for as long as I live.